"Don't get in that helicopter!" The shout didn't just cut the air, it split it. Grant Whitaker flinched, fingers already on the Bell 429 door latch. Behind him, the turbine screamed, rotors biting harder each second. The ramp shook with noise, yet that voice, young, cracked, desperate, pierced everything like a warning siren. He snapped around. A girl, barefoot and small, maybe 12, was sprinting straight at him across the tarmac. Thin legs kicked up grit. Her shirt, once pink, had faded to dusty rose and hung torn at one shoulder. Frayed jeans whipped in the rotor wash. She looked like she'd run far beyond this field. Grant stepped away from the aircraft and lifted an arm at the pilot. "Hold!" he barked into his headset. The rotors thundered, but the pilot caught the signal and eased back. The helicopter trembled on its skids, still hungry to lift, while Grant's gaze stayed locked on the charging child. The turbine began to wind down, blades slowing from a blur to heavy chops. The girl reached him, sweat streaking her forehead, eyes wide and sharp with panic. "Stop! Please don't go!" she gasped. "They did something to it." Grant held up a palm. "Breathe. Tell me who." She pointed past his shoulder. Grant's stomach dropped. 20 feet behind him stood his security detail. 2 lean men in dark suits and mirrored shades, silent as posts. They hadn't shifted since escorting him onto the ramp, yet her finger trembled. "I saw them," she insisted, voice shaking but precise. "Or 2 guys just like them," she said. "Same suits, same build. Last night by the fence, they opened something under the chopper." Grant turned toward the men. The taller one, Briggs, tilted his head, puzzled. The other, Carter, shifted uneasily. "Sir, we've been with you all morning," Briggs said evenly. Grant didn't answer. He studied the girl instead, weighing fear against truth. She wasn't begging for attention. She was bracing for impact. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ava Wilkins," she whispered, lips trembling, tears held back by stubborn will. The rotors above gave a tired, slow creak. Something in Grant's chest tightened. The specificity, the calm inside the panic. He thumbed his phone. "Denton," he snapped. "Run a diagnostic sweep, tail number 114. Get Evan on the undercarriage and nav stack, now." He looked back at Ava. "You watched them touch the helicopter?" She nodded hard. "I thought they were mechanics," Ava said, "until I saw them cut a panel and slide a black box inside." "Where were you?" Grant asked. "Near the dumpsters with my grandma," she answered. "We don't bother anyone. I couldn't sleep. I was out collecting bottles." Grant stared at her bleeding feet on baked concrete. One knee was scraped raw, yet she stood straight, chin up against the wind. The helicopter sat quiet now, waiting like a trap that hadn't sprung. Grant made his choice. "Come with me," he said, gesturing toward the terminal. Ava followed, still watching the aircraft as if it might explode the moment she blinked. When the doors shut, the roar faded to a muffled hum. Grant walked Ava past a startled receptionist and straight into maintenance. She perched on a wooden bench, arms wrapped tight around herself. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then Denton returned, face pale, and handed Grant a tablet. "We found something, sir." Grant's jaw locked as he read. A signal disruptor had been embedded near the flight computer, expertly hidden, programmed to activate about 10 minutes into the flight. Far enough out to lose comms, close enough to blame pilot error. Grant slowly looked at Ava. She didn't smile. "I'm glad you didn't go," she said. Outside, the rotors groaned to a full stop. For the first time in decades, Grant Whitaker, billionaire, builder, man who controlled rooms with a glance, felt the ground shift under him. A child's shout had saved his life. Sometimes power doesn't change fate. Courage does. If that moment hits you, drop a like for Ava. And tell us where you're watching from, because you'd be shocked who's listening nearby. The maintenance office smelled like oil and old coffee. Grant stood at the window, arms crossed, eyes on the silent bell, 4:29. Ava sat behind him, cocoa in both hands, cup barely touched, cooling as her breathing finally steadied. Denton came back in, tension carved into his face. "We pulled last night's security footage, the window she mentioned," he said. "There's a blacked-out stretch, 27 minutes of total loss, never happened before." Grant turned slowly. "Internal failure?" Denton shook his head. "Manual loop insertion. Someone overrode the feed." Grant inhaled through his nose, calculations sliding into place like steel plates. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. "Who had access to the aircraft in the last 48 hours?" he asked. "6 people," Denton replied. 2 mechanics, you, your assistant, and the 2 contractors, Briggs and Carter. Grant's gaze flicked to Ava. Through the tinted glass, the suited men stood guard like statues. Ava's voice came soft. "They looked just like them." Grant turned. "You're sure?" She nodded slowly. "One wore gloves, black leather, it was warm out, that was weird." The detail hit Grant like a punch. Briggs always wore gloves. Grant's eyes narrowed. A quirk he'd ignored now felt like a signature. "Denton," he said without turning, "take Ava to the staff lounge. Keep someone with her at all times. And find her grandmother, quietly. Bring her here under protection." Denton nodded. Ava rose, shoulders tight, then followed him out without looking back. When the door clicked shut, Grant pulled a secure tablet from his desk drawer and opened encrypted files. Contracts, NDAs, bids. The centerpiece glowed. His company's pending U.S. Department of Transportation contract to modernize GPS-based aviation control, a deal north of $900 million. The rival circling hardest, Ardent Dynamics. A crash mid-test flight would torch his credibility, sink the bid, and hand Ardent the win on a silver platter. A knock tapped the frame. Carter stepped in, polite as a brochure. "Everything all right, Mr. Whitaker?" Grant studied him, too even, too rehearsed. "Fine," Grant said flatly. "Send Briggs in now." Carter nodded and left. 30 seconds later, Briggs arrived, closing the door with quiet confidence, moving like he owned every hallway he entered. Grant gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit." Briggs obeyed, expression unreadable behind the shades. Grant slid the tablet across the desk, schematic open, the tampered module highlighted in red. "Recognize it?" Briggs barely glanced. "Not particularly." "Ava does," Grant said softly. She described the install. 2 men, a black box, the exact panel. A tiny twitch pulled at Briggs's mouth. Grant leaned forward. "What bothers me is last week you asked for off-hours hangar access. You said you lost a cufflink in my backup jet." Grant's voice stayed calm, but the room chilled. "You sent Carter in, not yourself. That same night the camera logs show a manual override. Yesterday you called in sick, yet you were on site. No sign-in, no greetings." Briggs's jaw tightened, almost imperceptible. "You're reading too much," he said. Grant didn't blink. "Am I?" Silence pressed in. Grant rose slowly. "You're loyal," he said, "or I thought you were. Who paid you to ruin me?" Briggs's stare dulled. "You don't have proof." Grant opened the door. 2 federal agents stepped in, badges up. "Not yet," Grant said. But I have instinct and a brave kid." Briggs didn't fight. He rose, straightened his tie, and walked out between the agents with a single, resigned nod. Grant exhaled, then returned to the window. In the corridor, Ava stood near a vending machine, a clean towel around her shoulders. An older woman, her grandmother, clutched her tight. Grant felt shame twist into resolve. Denton came up behind him. "How'd she know?" he asked. Grant's eyes stayed on Ava's small frame. "She watches," Grant murmured, "when no one else does." Denton swallowed. "What now?" Grant's voice dropped. "Now we follow the trail straight into Orion." The name tasted like rust. Arden's shadow logistics empire no one talked about. The lobby's normal hum tried to return, but Grant stayed frozen. He kept seeing Ava's bare feet pounding the tarmac, her scream knifing through turbines. Under suspicion and noise, one truth rang. The smallest voice can carry the heaviest weight, and sometimes it's the only thing that keeps a man like him from falling. The office still reeked of oil and stale coffee, but the air had shifted. Grant stood at the window, arms crossed, eyes on the silent bell 429. Ava sat where he'd placed her, guarded and quiet. Denton re-entered. The blackout was 1:15 to 1:42 a.m. Blank. Triple redundancy didn't matter, he said. Grant turned. "So someone wiped it, or inserted a pre-recorded loop." Denton nodded. "That's exactly what it looks like." Grant's gaze slid to Ava as she lifted her eyes from the floor. "Briggs and Carter," she said softly. "Two guys built like them. Same walk, same shape." Grant's knuckles whitened around the window frame. Ava hesitated, then added, "One had black gloves." Grant's mind clicked. Briggs. Always. He stepped to the desk, yanked open a drawer, and secured the tablet again, scrolling through access logs and vendor rosters. Every detail that once felt like background noise now sounded like an alarm. He'd trusted the wrong quiet men. He punched the intercom. "Denton, move Ava to the staff lounge. Keep eyes on her. Quietly locate her grandmother and bring her here. No press." "Yes, sir," Denton answered. The door closed. Grant faced the window, expression carved from stone. The world outside looked the same, but his reality had shifted by inches. Deadly inches. "Send Briggs in," Grant called down the hall. The request felt like bait. Less than a minute later, Briggs returned, shutting the door. "You needed me, sir." "Sit," Grant said. Briggs sat, posture rigid, calm, too calm. Grant laid the tablet between them, schematic displayed, the highlighted module glowing like an accusation. "Tell me what you see." Briggs's gaze flicked once. "A diagram." "A diagram that could have killed me," Grant said. "Ava described the exact compartment you opened. You came to me 3 years ago swearing loyalty over paychecks." Briggs stayed level. "I meant it." Grant leaned in. "Then tell me who told you to drop my helicopter out of the sky." For a moment, Briggs held the mask. Then his eyes went flat. "I don't name names," he said. Grant's voice sharpened. "Was it Orion?" Briggs looked away. "I was told to make the flight go down. No questions." Grant's pulse stayed slow, controlled. "Who relayed it?" Briggs swallowed. "A man called Mason Klein, middleman." "Klein didn't come direct," Briggs said. "It ran through Prime Air Secure Ops, shell paperwork, crypto payments, no trace." Grant studied him. "Do you know what Ava saw?" Briggs went silent. Grant's voice lowered. "She saw my ending and still ran toward me." "That's what you underestimated. That's why you're sitting here." Grant pressed a hidden button beneath the desk. The office door opened instantly. 2 plainclothes agents stepped inside, federal badges catching the light. "I'm reporting an attempted aviation sabotage," Grant said calmly. "This man can start you off." Briggs didn't resist. He stood, straightened his tie again, and walked out without looking back. Grant returned to the window. Down the hall, Ava now wore a clean towel like a cape, her small shoulders finally unclenched. Her grandmother held her close, whispering into her hair. They stood by the vending machines, untouched by the storm Grant had just unleashed. Ava looked up and met his eyes through the glass, steady, unafraid. Denton slipped in. "Sir, what now?" Grant's eyes stayed on Ava. "Run Mason Klein, full background," he said, and put federal eyes on every vendor tied to Ardent and Orion in the last 6 months. "Already moving," Denton replied. Grant paused. "Ava and her grandmother stay safe, today and every day. No exceptions." Denton nodded and left. Grant kept his hands in his pockets, jaw set. He'd come for clarity to outrun pressure. Instead, a barefoot girl with a torn shoulder seam had shouted him back to life. Purpose replaced rage, not just to win or retaliate, but to listen, to notice, the way she did. By dusk, Grant returned to his penthouse over San Francisco Bay. The view meant nothing. His mind was still on the ramp, Ava's scream under rotor thunder. He loosened his tie and entered his study, leather and oak smelling of old victories. The safe behind an abstract painting pulled at him like gravity. He keyed the code and drew out a slim black folder stamped, "Federal Bid, Eyes Only." Inside sat 5 years of work. A next-generation GPS integration system, adaptive control meant to prevent mid-air collisions. Grant had expected to beat Ardent on brilliance. Now he understood they'd tried to beat him by burying him in the sky. He called his private line. Special Agent Denise Kearney appeared, mid-50s, sharp, unimpressed by wealth. "Late call," she said. "They made a move," Grant replied. "Briggs, he gave me a name, Mason Klein." Denise frowned. "Not official, but it's floated in D.C., defense-adjacent deals, offshore routing, never sticks long." "I want a federal investigation," Grant said. "Quiet, no leaks." Denise held his gaze. "This isn't corporate chess, it's attempted murder." "I know," Grant answered. "Do you have the child secured?" she asked. "Yes, Ava Wilkins, 12. She's why I'm still breathing." Denise exhaled. "Then send me everything. I'll run it from my end." The call ended. Grant sat in silence as city lights blinked on like distant fireflies. Denise had been right. Ava speaking up was dangerous. Yet that danger was the spark. A girl nobody had guarded him. Guilt settled in his chest, then hardened into resolve. He would not let her courage vanish into paperwork. Next morning, Ava rode in a black Suburban, fingers locked around her grandmother's hand. Clean jeans, a navy hoodie, and sneakers that flashed when she stepped felt unreal. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. The SUV rolled toward Whitaker Aerospace Systems' downtown tower, glass gleaming under a low gray sky. Grant met them at the lobby doors. No tie, sleeves rolled. "Not at all," he told Ava. "You're guests, more than that." He guided them past executives who pretended not to stare. Marble swallowed their footsteps. Ava's eyes widened at the towering atrium, but she kept her chin up and didn't release her grandmother's hand. In a private conference room, Denise waited with a laptop and that steady cop-quiet calm. She shook Grant's hand, then knelt to Ava's level. "You remember what you saw?" "Yes, ma'am. Even tiny details matter," Denise said. Ava glanced at Grant, then nodded. "Okay." The room went still for a child's truth. Ava described the gloves, the long metal case, the panel unlatched under the bell 429, the whispered words. Then she added, there was a logo on a shirt, Gigatrack Solutions. Denise's eyes met Grant's. Gigatrack is an Arian subsidiary, she said. Grant exhaled. So it connects them. It connects, Denise corrected. It doesn't convict yet. When Denise paused for notes, Ava drifted to a model aircraft in the corner and traced its wings like they were alive. Grant approached carefully. You did more than most adults, he said. You didn't run away. You ran toward me. Ava looked up, steady. Because you were going to die, she said, and nobody else spoke. Grant swallowed. Has that happened before? Seeing something wrong and nobody listens? Ava nodded. At school, around home, people look over you, not at you. Grant crouched. Not anymore. He pulled a small pin, Whitaker Aerospace crest, silver with a blue wing and compass, and clipped it to her hoodie. You're one of us. Ava touched the pin. Even if I don't fly? You already did, Grant said. You saved the pilot and me. Later, after escorting Ava and her grandmother home under protection, Grant returned to his office window. Storm clouds hung low over the city. Denton entered. Ready to hit back, sir? Grant turned, voice calm. I'm building forward. That evening, as the sun bleedy behind the Golden Gate, Grant descended to a dim, sub-level OPS room wired into satellites, private servers, and sealed surveillance archives. Denise sat beside him, scrubbing time codes as frames flickered across a curved screen. There, she said, zooming in. Frame 479, right before the blackout. Grant leaned close. Grainy pixels, but enough. A silhouette with a long case, backlit by a service truck. No face, no features, just posture that matched Ava's description. Same time, she said, Grant murmured. Denise nodded, then nudged the footage forward, letting the moment hang like a hook set deep. Digital snowstorm swallowed the feed. The footage jumped, froze, then resumed 27 minutes later. Clean, empty, perfect. Grant shook his head. No malfunction. That's a loop. Denise tapped metadata. Worse, a dead curtain package buries real timestamps under dummy data. Only high-level contractors know how to deploy it. It's a signature move. Grant turned. Whose signature? Denise's face hardened. Gigatrack. I've seen the pattern in 3 prior aviation tampering cases over 5 years. Same erasure, same cleanup. Never public, never confirmed. Grant clenched his jaw. So, this wasn't sabotage for sport. No, Denise said. It's strategic erasure. They wanted you to disappear inside the aircraft. Grant paced to the Bell 429 schematic, pulsing with highlighted hazard zones. Denton's report echoed. The relay was tied into GPS nav and secondary comms. 5 minutes in, I'd be rerouted and radio silent, Grant said. Denise finished, over water or a remote corridor where mechanical failure, cells easy and rescue arrives too late. Grant opened Arden's proposal, dated 2 weeks earlier, and found the clause buried in footnotes. Shared testing corridor coordination, East Coast facilities. It matched his flight plan too cleanly. He looked up. They weren't just planting hardware, he said. They were planting a story. Denise nodded. A story with paperwork, and a corpse that can't argue. Grant stared until the letters blurred. Ava's feet, Ava's shout, proof. The plan wasn't perfect, just arrogant. He straightened, anger cooling into focus. We document everything, he said. Every vendor badge, every gate scan, every subcontract. Denise nodded. Make the invisible trail visible. Grant's eyes hardened. And keep Ava untouchable. Denise pulled procurement chains and offshore routing maps onto the screen. Start with Orion's logistics arm. Gigatrack, Prime Air, any shell entities touching hangar access, she said. Grant added, and Mason Klein. Find who he pays and who pays him. Denise warned, careful. Men like this don't improvise, they coordinate. Grant's mouth tightened. So do we. Grant layered employee rosters, vendor badges, and gate logs over the missing footage like transparent sheets. Patterns surfaced, gaps that matched contracts, trucks that appeared without dispatch, names that vanished after midnight. They built a corridor of silence, Denise murmured. Grant thought of Ava. She ran straight through it, he said. Not alone anymore. The screen cycled back to the silhouette with the long case. Denise magnified until the image broke into blocks. Truck IDs scrubbed, she said, but reflection shows a yard code. Grant leaned in. That's enough for dispatch subpoenas, he said. Enough to make somebody sweat. Denise nodded. And enough to stand up a task force. Above them, the city kept breathing, unaware. Below, warrants formed in silence. Grant watched Denise tag frames, draft affidavits, and lock filings away from public dockets. He pictured Briggs counting on politeness and fear. A kid wasn't polite, Grant said. She was honest. Denise answered without looking up. Honesty is dangerous. That's why it works. Denise replayed the blackout start. This snowstorm isn't random, she said. It's timed, triggered by a proximity beacon. Grant frowned. So someone had to be close. Yes, Denise replied. Close to the junction box or network node. Grant's eyes sharpened. Then the perimeter's compromised. Denise went grim. Or staffed. Someone opened the door. Grant pulled up Denise's flagged cases, 3 earlier incidents with the same dead curtain metadata trick. Different cities, different aircraft, identical erasure. It never went public, Grant said, because they buried it. Denise nodded. And victims were isolated, no witness like Ava. Grant's hands curled. Then we protect the witness, he said, with everything. Denise pointed at the wiring overlay. Your disruptor was tied into nav and comms, she said. 10 minutes in, it wakes up, scrambles GPS and chokes the radio. Grant traced the route on the map. Off course, off frequency, out of sight. Denise nodded. Over water, where wreckage becomes tragedy and rescue becomes a headline too late. Grant reopened Arden's draft and highlighted the testing corridor clause, then cross-checked his flight plan. The overlap was ruthless. They were building a narrative, he said, a mechanical failure in a shared corridor. Denise's voice turned ice. Assassination wrapped in compliance language. Grant's eyes hardened. Then we ripped the wrapping off, dragged truth into daylight. Grant closed the file and faced the far wall where hazard zones glowed like fresh wounds. 5 minutes into the flight, I'd have been rerouted and radio silent, he said. Denise finished, and the world would call it tragedy. Grant turned back to the screens. They tried to erase me, he said. Instead, they woke me up. If Grant crashed, they'd step in with their guidance stack. Claim Whitaker Aerospace was flawed, seize the contract, and own the future of civilian airspace. Greedy and brutal, Special Agent Denise Kearney said. Grant exhaled, temples aching. We can't go public yet. Without a full chain, people, money, motive, and method. Denise nodded once. "So, we go deeper." She studied him. "Any internal whistleblowers?" Grant hesitated, then pulled an archived employee roster. One name lit up like a bruise: Ethan Park, a systems analyst who'd quit abruptly 8 months earlier. HR called it personal reasons, but the exit never felt clean or final. "He helped design our first-gen nav relay," Grant said. "He knows the wiring like a map." Denise's eyes narrowed. "Was he approached?" Grant's jaw tightened. "He never jumped to Ardent, but I think someone tried to buy him." "Where is he now?" "Sacramento. Last trace is a P.O. box, yet I'll find him." That night, Grant drove himself. He hated Sacramento traffic. Slow, hesitant, always braking for ghosts. But being alone behind the wheel steadied his nerves. No assistance, no entourage, no security chatter. Just asphalt, dim streetlights, and the soft thump of his heartbeat reminding him he'd almost become a headline. The address led to a worn industrial block and a rundown co-working building with a flickering sign. A broken mailbox bore 2 plain letters: EP. Grant knocked once. No answer. Then a cracked door down the hall creaked, and a voice murmured, almost amused, "Didn't think you'd come yourself." Grant turned. Ethan Park stepped into the corridor, older than Grant remembered, darker circles under his eyes, shoulders held tight like he expected a strike. "I heard about the incident," Ethan said. "Figured they'd come for you sooner or later." Grant moved closer, careful. "Then you know who they are." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "They came a year ago," Ethan whispered. "Wanted technical insight for compliance coordination. Offered 10 times my salary and an NDA that was basically a contract for silence." "You refused," Grant said. "I walked away, thought it ended." Ethan's voice dropped. 6 months ago, my apartment was hit. Nothing stolen, except my old company laptop." Grant's pulse jumped. "You still have access to our blueprints?" Ethan pulled a small hard drive from his coat pocket. "Not anymore. But before I resigned, I made a mirror. You'll find the first schematic for the tamper point, the exact seam they exploited." Grant took it, eyes hard. Why hand it over now? Ethan looked away, shame and resolve mixing. "Because I saw Ava on the local clip, barefoot, screaming over rotors. Braver than anything I ever did." Back in San Francisco, Grant placed the drive in Denise's hands. Her analysts began decrypting immediately. 2 hours later, a tech lifted his head, voice tight. "Ma'am, embedded name in the patch code." "Show me," Denise said. The screen displayed a line like a fingerprint. Red G, protocol lock, access level 9. Denise's gaze snapped to Grant. "We've got our installer. Now we find who gave him the key." Grant leaned back, feeling the wind shift. It wasn't over, but the truth was no longer buried, and he wasn't alone. Morning fog curled low over the Whitaker test facility, turning hangars into gray silhouettes. Inside the executive conference room, lights stayed dim while a 3D hologram of the Bell 429 rotated above the table. A red pulse blinked beneath the co-pilot seat, exactly where the sabotaged relay had been hidden. Denise stood arms crossed, watching analysts unpack Ethan's files. One technician spoke, AWE edged with disgust. "We ran sims using the altered GPS script from the mirror drive. With the module active, the aircraft diverts 7 minutes after liftoff, 2 miles offshore, no radar, no comms, total blackout event." Grant's stomach turned. Denise pointed at the model. It would read like mechanical failure, career-ending, quiet, believable. Grant stared at the pulsing red mark. Whose idea was it? Denise turned to an analyst and opened a folder tagged Red. We matched the code ID to Primaire Secure Ops logs, access level 9. A new name appeared. Derek Vance, VP of Systems Integration, Ardent Dynamics. Grant felt his stomach drop. Grant released a slow breath. Vance submitted the opposing bid 2 weeks ago. Denise's jaw tightened. Worse, he requested expedited testing for Ardent's backup guidance the same day you were scheduled to fly. Grant leaned forward. So if I died, they'd pitch their system as the safe fix to a tragedy they staged. Exactly, Denise said. Silence settled like wet concrete. Grant rose and went to the window where the landing strip shimmered behind fog. Ava's scream still echoed in his skull. He turned back. We need more than names and code, something they can't spin. Denise nodded. Financial links, meetings, messages. Grant's voice sharpened. Wire transfers, records, anything no lawyer can explain away. Denise's phone buzzed. She read, then lifted her eyes. We may have it. An undercover analyst inside Prime Air intercepted a secure message flagged under Vance's internal login. A burner? Grant asked. Yes, but the signature lines match Red's last known device. Denise turned the screen toward him, letting the words land without commentary. The text was short and ice-cold. Test failed, target survived, initiate fallback protocol. No further contact until dust settles. Grant read it twice, then again. Fallback means retaliation or cleanup, he said. Denise's eyes hardened. Either way, they know you're alive, and they know the operation failed. That changes everything. Grant's eyes darkened. Then Ava's at risk. Denise nodded. I doubled her detail, but we need to move her and her grandmother today. Grant grabbed his phone. No need. Bring them to my estate, off-grid, monitored, layered security. Nothing moves there without me seeing it. Denise didn't argue. She just nodded like a judge signing a warrant. That afternoon, under heavy escort, Ava and her grandmother arrived at Grant's private estate in Sonoma County. 80 acres. Sleek glass architecture, stitched to protective steel, vineyards on one side, forest on the other. Ava stepped out slowly, clutching a paper notebook to her chest, scanning the quiet like it might hide teeth. Even birdsong sounded careful. Grant met her on the front steps, jacket off, sleeves rolled, a softness in his eyes Ava hadn't seen before. You're safe here, he said, and not just because of walls. Ava nodded, then looked up. Did you find who they are? We're close, Grant said. Closer because of you. She hesitated, then held out her notebook. The notebook held sketches, simple lines, brutal accuracy. A man in a black cap sliding something under the bell, 429. A dark SUV by the fence. One page showed Grant beside her. Tall, but not threatening. Grant flipped through, throat tight. You remember more than my engineers, he said. Ava shrugged. When nobody listens, you watch harder. That night, Denise called. Confirmation, she said. Vance's phone pinged at a private terminal in Nevada. He's trying to leave the country. Grant stepped onto the patio, stars blinking through branches. Homeland and Interpol? Already alerted. Grant's voice went flat. Good. And Red? Denise added. Still hiding, but Vance will crack. People like them don't carry the whole plan, Denise said. They're paid hands. Grant stared toward the guest house where Ava's light still burned. Then we expose the whole machine, he replied. After the call, he watched that single-lit window. Inside, Ava drew again, quietly mapping shadows. Adults kept stepping over, eyes fixed above the danger. Under night stillness and the hum of buried sensors, Grant made a new promise. Not for contracts, not for control, not for revenge, but for truth and the child who spoke it. 3 days later, he waited behind a velvet curtain, listening to reporters buzz and shutters snap inside the Whitaker Grand Hall. This wasn't business. This was reckoning. Denise stood beside him with an earpiece, scanning final notes. Vance was intercepted at Heathrow, she whispered. Interpol has him. Red's gone dark, but the first domino fell. Grant asked, "Do we have enough?" Denise nodded. Hacked comm logs, Ethan's archive, Ava's statement, and Vance's travel trail. We won't just convict, we'll expose everything. A stage manager signaled 2 minutes. Grant adjusted his cufflinks. No tie, charcoal suit, plain and deliberate. He didn't want to look untouchable, he wanted to look accountable. In the wings, Ava stood with Nora, hands folded, eyes darting to the crowd. Grant nodded. Ava nodded back. Steady, stronger than 12 should have to be. Lights dimmed, curtain rose. Grant stepped into the spotlight and walked to the podium, unhurried. Cameras clicked like insects. He let silence stretch. 3 weeks ago, I nearly boarded a helicopter that never would have landed, he began. They would have called it nav failure, pilot error, an accident. The world would have moved on. Grant paused, letting the words sink. But it wasn't an accident. It wasn't simple. He scanned faces hungry for spectacle. I'm here because someone far braver than most refused to stay silent. He turned toward the wings. Reporters leaned forward, lenses shifting, the room holding its breath for whoever was about to step into the light. Ava stepped forward with Nora at her side. A gasp rolled through the room as cameras swung. She looked small in that hall, almost swallowed by the spotlight, but she didn't flinch. Grant said, "This is Ava Wilkins. She's 12. Not an engineer, not an agent, just a kid who pays attention." He faced the crowd. "She saved my life." A beat of silence, then applause rose, cautious and real. Grant lifted a hand to steady it. "I won't detail every piece today. The investigation is ongoing. But I can say this. Executives, contractors, and affiliates tied to Ardent Dynamics tried to eliminate me to win a federal aviation contract. They rigged my aircraft and planned my disappearance." Grant's voice stayed controlled. They failed because they underestimated an unheard voice. He looked at Ava. "Do you want to say anything?" Ava glanced at Nora, then at the crowd. Her voice was small and clear. "I just didn't want him to die." The room went still, then softened, like it exhaled together. Grant straightened. "In Ava's honor, and for every kid who's ever seen something wrong and felt invisible, I'm launching the Ava Watch Initiative." Murmurs rolled. "It will fund safety resources, digital literacy, and advocacy tools in underrepresented communities. Paying attention shouldn't be punished." Applause returned instantly, louder and longer. Grant only nodded, accepting duty, not praise. Later, Grant returned to the estate, drained, yet sharper. Ava sat beneath the oak, sketching with steady focus. "You were amazing," he said, taking a chair beside her. Ava shrugged. "I didn't say much." "You didn't have to," Grant replied. "Truth speaks loud." Ava flipped pages. "What happens now?" Grant watched her pencil. "We keep going, together." Ava asked, "Do you think I could be a pilot someday?" Grant smiled. "You already are. You saved someone, mid-flight before the skids ever lifted." As the sun fell behind the Vineyard Hills, quiet settled. Not fear, but clarity. Outside the trees, lawsuits and headlines waited. For now, a billionaire and a barefoot kid sat like co-navigators of truth. The next morning, headlines roared across every network. Aviation tycoon targeted. Child's warning stops assassination. Ardent executives under federal probe. Grant didn't sleep through any of it. He sat at his kitchen table, robe on, oatmeal untouched, watching the noise surge. The support felt real. So did the backlash. Both were rising fast. Denton entered with a tablet, expression tight. Federal agents raided Ardent's D.C. office at dawn. 15 terabytes seized, 30-plus encrypted devices. Grant nodded once. And Vance? UK custody, extradition pending. His lawyers are pushing for a sealed deposition. Grant rubbed his temples. Of course. They'll try to keep this in shadows. Denton swallowed. There's more. Gavin Red surfaced, Denton said. Grant's eyes sharpened. He tried to flee through a private port in Baja, but Mexican authorities intercepted him. He's being held quietly. Grant's voice dropped. Does he know Ava's name? Denton shook his head. Not unless someone leaked it. Her identity is sealed, location rotated, federal firewalls. Grant nodded. Keep it sealed. Sunrise spilled gold over the vines. Ava sat on the porch under a light blanket, sketching with focused calm. Nora hummed inside while cooking. Grant sat beside Ava. Drawing again? Ava nodded. A bird, not flying, watching. Grant smiled faintly. What kind? Ava paused. The kind that sees storms before they arrive. Grant let that sit, then said, It's going to get noisier. People will twist this, about me, about you. Ava didn't look up. Grandma said they'd twist stuff. She's right, Grant replied. But truth doesn't change because someone bends the story. Ava flipped pages and drew a looping line like a flight path, slow and certain. Are they going to jail? Ava asked. Grant stared toward the fog line. Some will fight and lie, but the chain is breaking. Ava was quiet, then asked, Why did they want to hurt you? Grant's jaw tightened. Because I was in the way. They wanted power and control, and I had something they needed to steal. Ava's pencil slowed. But they didn't get it, she said. Grant turned to her. No, because of you. Later, he returned downtown to face his board. The room was tense, awe and fear. Grant stood with a printed statement. I know you're thinking, stock price, reputation, contracts, he began. But we were almost used as a weapon. Grant scanned them. Our tech and trust were hijacked because we confused silence with safety. He set the paper down. From today, we change. Every system gets double audits. Murmurs rose. We launched the Ava protocol, he added. A watchdog, AI-assisted, always human-verified, plus anonymous reporting for entry-level staff. Every alert gets executive review. A board member frowned. You're basing policy on a child's warning? Grant didn't blink. She saw what we missed and saved my life. So yes. Silence held, then slow nods. Grant finished, voice steady. The day we stop believing wisdom can come from the lowest rung is the day we invite collapse. We won't invite it again. That evening, Ava watched the first stars from the garden edge. Nora wrapped an arm around her. You did good, baby, she whispered. Ava asked, Did I change something? Nora smiled. You changed everything. From the porch, Grant told Denton, She'll outgrow this place. Denton smiled. I hope so. Grant replied, That's the point. Wind moved the trees. An owl calling beyond the vineyard. In that calm, the world shifted. not with violence but certainty. The estate chapel wasn't grand, just wood and quiet. Yet it held more weight than any boardroom, gratitude made visible and a promise spoken aloud to the people who'd kept Grant alive simply by telling the truth. Grant stood at the back adjusting his sleeves. No press, no cameras, just staff, agents, a few close colleagues, and 2 front chairs, reserved for guests who didn't know why. Ava and Nora entered quietly, escorted by Denise. Ava wore a pale yellow dress and white sneakers, hair braided neat, crest pin catching light like a quiet badge. When everyone settled, Denise stepped to the lectern. "We're not here to mourn," she said. "We're here to honor what was prevented by someone most people wouldn't notice." She faced Ava. This child spoke up, redirected an investigation, and exposed corruption that would have passed unseen. Denise's voice stayed firm. She showed courage people twice her age couldn't find. An assistant carried a framed certificate with a gold seal. Denise read, "For bravery and service to the public good, the .FAA Award, Ava Wilkins, the Civilian Medal of Federal Distinction." A soft gasp rippled. Ava froze, eyes wide, then looked at Nora. Grant stepped forward, took the frame, and knelt to present it. Careful, steady, respectful. "You didn't just save me," Grant whispered. "You reminded me what it means to really see." Ava blinked hard, tears rising. "I didn't mean to be brave," she said. Grant smiled. "Nobody plans bravery. They just do the right thing when it's time." The room stood and applauded in warm waves until Ava's shoulders finally loosened. Afterward, guests drifted through the garden under gray light. Grant walked beside Ava. "I heard you're going back to school next week," he said. Ava nodded. "Grandma says it's time." "Are you ready?" Ava looked up. "I notice more now." Grant smiled. "That's awareness. Strength." Ava hesitated. "Will people believe me when I speak?" Grant looked across the vines. "Some will, some won't. Belief isn't the point. You know what you saw, and you don't stop saying it because it makes people uncomfortable." He handed her a leather-bound journal. "It's blank. Write the rest of your story." Ava opened it. "Write about you?" Grant chuckled. "Only if I earn the chapter." That afternoon, Denise sent a secure update. Gavin read, confessed. Under oath, Derek Vance authorized the sabotage through ardent cutouts. Evidence matched. Charges were being drafted. Names would go public next week. Grant read it twice and closed the device. Final didn't mean safe. It meant the backlash would sharpen. He went looking for Ava anyway, needing her calm. Across the yard, Ava sat beneath the oak, sketching quietly. She looked peaceful, no longer a headline, just a kid reclaiming normal. Grant felt something deeper than pride, clarity. In a world loud with money and power, one cracked voice had pierced the rotor wash and changed everything. Ava shouted first. Now the system was forced to keep listening. The days after stayed tense, but the estate breathed like a fortress. Federal protection rotated routes, patrols ran silent. Nora kept routines, tea at dawn, hymns in the kitchen. Like motion kept fear from settling. Grant met Denise nightly, reviewing warrants and vendor chains. "They'll bury evidence in litigation," she warned. Grant replied, "Then we dig louder and cleaner." Grant's attorneys begged him to step back. "Let prosecutors talk," they said. But he'd learned silence could be a weapon. He approved the Ava protocol, opened reporting channels, and demanded every alert hit the top. Some executives grumbled. Grant didn't care. "They planned a disappearance," he told Denton. "We answer with exposure. Enough to burn lies off the bone. 2 mornings later, an unmarked convoy delivered protection for Nora and Ava. Denise briefed them like a pilot's checklist. Rotate vehicles, brake patterns, avoid predictable stops. Ava listened, chin lifted. Grant showed her the security room, screens, sensors, perimeter alarms. "This isn't to scare you," he said. "It's to keep your voice safe." Ava nodded. "I want to understand." A prosecutor called. Vance wanted a sealed deposition, keeping testimony out of public record. Denise scoffed. "They still think this stays in the dark." Grant found Ava by the garden fence, sketching gloves again. "You're turning memory into paper," he said. Ava answered softly. "So nobody can erase it." Grant's chest tightened. "Good," he said, "because erasure ends tonight." That evening, Denise arrived with a slim folder, burner pings, travel manifests, and a clean financial thread. "Orion's cutout paid Prime Air," she said. "Prime Air paid Red. Red's wallet fed the sabotage team." Grant read, then looked up. "That's the spine." Denise nodded. "Once we show it, the accident story collapses." Grant exhaled. "Then we show it." The next media cycle hit. Some praised Grant, others called it theater. Anonymous accounts tried to smear Ava's family. Coaching, cash, lies. Denise shut it down with redactions and court orders. Grant watched the ugliness and kept his voice steady. "This is why we waited for proof," he said. "Noise can't drown evidence." Denise replied. "And evidence bites back." Federal teams raided Prime Air, ardent subcontractors, and the Nevada terminal routing Vance's messages. Encrypted phones and hard drives vanished into evidence crates. Denise called from the field. "They're panicking. Red's lawyer wants a deal." Grant stared toward Ava's guest house. "No deal that risks her," Denise answered, firm. "Agreed. If they want mercy, they bring full truth." That weekend, Ava asked to see the helicopter again. Not to ride, just to look. With Denise's approval, Grant took her to the hangar. The Bell 429 sat silent under lights, gleaming like a predator. Paused. Ava stood back, breathing. "It was loud that day," she said. Grant nodded. "And you were louder." Ava swallowed. "I was scared." Grant crouched beside her. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said. "It's what you do while fear is screaming." Ava traced the seam where the device hid. "They thought nobody would look down there," she whispered. Grant's voice went dark. "They counted on people looking away." Ava lifted her chin. "I won't." Grant nodded. "Then you'll stay ahead." Back at the estate, Nora served tea. "You're powerful," she told Grant, "but power didn't save you." Grant didn't argue. "Ava did." Nora's eyes softened. "Then protect her like you'd protect your company." Grant replied, "Better, like I'd protect my soul." Nora's hand trembled. "She's a child." Grant answered, "That's why this must end right." Ava returned to school under escort. Kids whispered, teachers watched, rumors outran facts. Ava walked anyway, journal in her bag, crest pin on her collar. That night she told Grant, "People looked at me like I'm different." Grant said, "Being seen can be heavy, but it can also be armor, if you choose it." Ava nodded. "I choose it." Indictments were ready. Red's confession, Vance's trail, contractor logs, decrypted code signatures. "Names go public next week," she said. "Ardent will fight, but they're boxed in." Grant asked one thing. "Ava and Nora protected through trial?" Denise answered instantly. "Signed orders, layered security, 0 gaps. Grant exhaled, finally letting weeks of breath go. Later, Grant found Ava writing under oak, not drawing. Nora hummed on the porch. "What's it say?" Grant asked. Ava didn't look up. "What I saw, what I felt, what I won't forget." Grant sat beside her. "Think the world forgets?" Ava shook her head. "Not if we keep telling it." Grant smiled. "Then we will." Straight, loud, true. A secure update arrived. Gavin Redd's sworn statement matched every technical detail. Derek Vance authorized the sabotage, and Arden's corridor request proved motive. Charges drafted. Public filings in 7 days, it read. Grant closed the device and stared over the vines. The future still felt sharp, but it leaned toward justice. Behind him, the estate stayed quiet, watching, ready. Across the yard, Ava wrote in her journal while Nora hummed. Grant didn't interrupt. He understood. Headlines would twist, lawyers would posture, and men would beg for darkness, but Ava's shout cracked their script. She forced them to react instead of control. For the first time in years, Grant felt purpose. Something money couldn't buy and enemies couldn't erase. Because in a world built on contracts and shadows, one uninvited, trembling voice pierced the rotor wash and bent history. Ava shouted first, and the system, so used to silencing kids, was forced to listen. Now, truth had witnesses, paper trails, and federal teeth. The storm wasn't over, but the darkness wasn't invisible anymore. The smallest voice can save a life. If you've lived long enough to watch America change in waves, war years, oil crises, booms, busts, and everything in between, you've learned this: danger doesn't always announce itself with sirens. Sometimes it comes dressed as routine, a familiar schedule, a trusted face, a clean suit, and a polite, "Yes, sir." That's what makes Grant Whitaker's moment on the tarmac so chilling. A billionaire with every advantage, security, technology, power, was one hand away from stepping into a helicopter that had been turned into a quiet coffin. And the person who stopped it wasn't an executive, an investigator, or a consultant with a fancy title. It was a barefoot 12-year-old girl with scraped knees and a voice that cracked through rotor thunder like a fire alarm. Ava didn't have influence. She had attention. She had instincts sharpened by being overlooked, by living in a world where people see past you, not at you. Older folks understand that kind of invisibility. Many of you have been ignored in a hospital waiting room, spoken over at a family gathering, dismissed because your hair is silver. Ava's shout is a reminder that wisdom and courage don't always arrive with credentials. Sometimes they arrive in torn jeans, running full speed into danger, because the truth is heavier than fear. Trust is not a feeling, it's a system you test. At 65 and beyond, you don't trust the way you did at 25. You've seen too much. You've watched good people make bad choices when money, pride, or pressure got involved. Grant's security detail looked perfect on paper: contracts, NDAs, professional posture. But the blacked-out security footage, the glove detail, the off-hours access requests, those were the real receipts. This is the hard lesson. Betrayal rarely looks like a villain twirling a mustache. It looks like someone who knows your habits and uses them against you. And the scariest part isn't that sabotage happened. It's that it was designed to look like pilot error. 10 minutes into the flight. Far enough away that help comes late. Close enough that the narrative forms fast. Tragic accident. Mechanical failure. These things happen. If you've ever dealt with insurance companies, corporate statements, or medical paperwork, You know how quickly a story can harden into fact once it's printed. That's why older Americans value verification. You don't bet your life on probably. You check the smoke detector. You read the fine print. You listen when something feels off. Grant's mistake wasn't arrogance. It was assuming silence meant safety. The correction wasn't vengeance. It was building a better system. Audits, redundancy, real accountability, and an open channel where even the lowest voice can be heard before disaster becomes a headline. Real legacy is who you protect after the crisis. Some people survive a close call and become smaller, more paranoid, more bitter, more sealed off. But the most meaningful turn in this story isn't the arrests or the indictments. It's what Grant does with the aftermath. He looks at Ava and sees a truth that's easy to miss. Bravery comes with a cost, especially for a child. Once she speaks, she becomes a target of criminals, of smear campaigns, of experts who want to rewrite her truth into something convenient. If you're a grandparent, you felt that in your bones. You know the world can be cruel when a young person stands out. Grant's real growth shows up when he decides Ava won't be a disposable hero in someone else's press cycle. He moves her and her grandmother to safety. He puts protection in writing. He changes policy inside his company so that future warnings don't die in someone's inbox. That's what legacy looks like at any age. Not the size of your bank account, but the size of your responsibility. Many of you have spent decades taking care of others, raising kids, serving communities, keeping families afloat when times were tight. You understand that the right thing isn't a speech. It's what you do on an ordinary Tuesday when the cameras are gone. Ava saved Grant's life with a shout. Grant honors that by making sure her voice doesn't get punished for being honest. The America worth leaving behind. In the end, this story isn't just about a sabotaged helicopter. It's about the country we're still building. One choice at a time. It asks a question older Americans know well. Will we keep believing power is always right, or will we make room for truth, even when it comes from someone society ignores? Because on that runway, courage didn't wear a suit. It ran barefoot across hot concrete and refused to let a man disappear into a clean lie. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed something small that others ignored? Something that could have prevented a disaster if people had just listened? Maybe it was a safety issue at work, a medical warning sign, or a moment when your gut told you, this isn't right. Share your story in the comments because your experience might help someone else speak up. If Ava's courage moved you, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because the next lesson might be the one you need most.